Hello, 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 hello. So, welcome back for another revisit episode whilst I am regrouping for season 4 for early 2023. So, this revisit episode has been picked intentionally because something happened recently that made me think, damn, this is still so relevant. Because originally, I actually had in mind another one, but I ended up landing on this one, not just because it's the second most listened episode of the year, but also because this episode discusses how things can go really wrong within the self-help industry. And it goes over all the red flags and how to actually see things early on so you don't end up in a really bad situation. And basically, the reason why I picked this one is because recently I was actually really willing to go and pay for some online products from this person who I have been following on social media, who had amazing advice, and I thought they were really good, and they seemed to be moving with such integrity and always great content. So to me, when I found out they were having this like online product, online event, blah, 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 all of this stuff, it was kind of a no-brainer to go and check it out. And basically, I was really shocked. There were so many red flags, and a lot of it made me think about what Ginny and Jean Brown were telling us in this episode, right? And the thing is, I was really shocked because that person selling those products, it was almost like two different people. The person on social media with the free content, with great advice, and then when they were selling, there was so many icky and slimy thing. Of course, there was the 3-day long event with like no end times. And even though it wasn't free, it was very, very cheap. And there was some very mysterious upsells at the end of it. And you wouldn't get any visibility of what they were until you'd be at the event. There was like incredulous miracle stories that person would tell themselves. Like there was no testimonials of the people going through that. Just a lot of really icky upsell marketing techniques. And that's why I felt really strongly about releasing this episode today. And I actually, there's a part of me that hopes that that person does not realize that those are not great sales technique whatsoever. They're quite unhealthy, quite slimy. So anyway, so I hope that this is going to be helpful. And listen, keep warm. Right? I use a lot of candles, by the way, for that. Oh my God. Like I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 8 candles right next to me. My desk when I'm recording this, plus a big scarf around my hips to keep warm, and a big hoodie. So yeah, just keep warm. And without further ado, let's give another big welcome to Ginny and Jean Brown for this revisit episode. Love you loads, and I'll speak to you soon. Just a content note, this episode contains sensitive content, so discretion is advised. I first heard about this story that I'm about to tell you on the Wondery podcast, Guru. And that story really touched me, and so I reached out to one of the guests on that show, Ginny Brown. Today, we talk about how individuals with professional careers, good intellect, and a willingness to look at themselves and their lives and improve it, and how those same people give up all their power and agency to one man, a total annihilation of self that led to 3 deaths in a quote-unquote sweat lodge in Sedona, Arizona. The other participants may not have died, but I can only imagine the personal cost of going through something like this must have been multi-layered and riddled with many conflicting emotions. James Arthur Ray was leading that weekend. He was the reason that they were there. After that weekend, he was convicted of negligent homicide and sentenced to 6 years in prison, 2 for each victim. A judge allowed the sentence to be served concurrently, meaning that Ray would serve 2 years, but he ended up serving 20 months. Now, because I'm not qualified to dig too deep into the pain of someone without being able to ensure that they're okay afterwards, After all, I am talking to the mother and sister of one of those three victims, Kirby Brown, who lost her life on that fatal day in October 2009. So I didn't go into the structure of what happened and what led to that tragic event. So I want to give you a summary before we start of what happened to Kirby so that you understand the context and some of the mentions in this episode. This story starts off by quite a common, usual route into the self-help industry until it doesn't. So I'm going to start with James Arthur Ray, who was leading that weekend where Kirby lost her life. So James Arthur Ray was brought to fame by the movie The Secret, which I'm sure many of you have seen the DVD, if you're old enough, and may even have read the book. And he was obviously propelled to international recognition when Oprah featured him several times on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Kirby loved Oprah, and of course her stamp of approval must have gone a long way. So when she heard that James Ray was holding an event in her area, she quite understandably got some tickets to go and see him. And I believe that first event was free, which is quite typical in the self-help industry. So she got her tickets, she went, and then she attended a couple of more events of his and attended the final one called Spiritual Warrior, which is a 5-day event and the price tag is $10,000. So what happened? How come 3 individuals with logic, professional careers, and just a strong will to better their life, how come those 3 people died of heat exhaustion in a sweat lodge? So the way I'm going to explain this is obviously very simplified. You can listen to the whole story on the Guru podcast. So what happened? There was an array of exercises, quote unquote games that took place. But to me, they all seem quite humiliating and built to break you down. Not that that kind of tactics is unheard of. You know, some training like Navy SEALs are taught to you really push through their limits. But those participants at this spiritual warrior event were regular people in a very different setting, very different structure and environment. So I will go over the 3 main events that were reported on that took place. The first one was the shaving of all of the women's head. Now, they were asked if they wanted to. They were, I guess, quote unquote, volunteering. But when some of them said no, it was reported that they were questioned as to why they refused to shave their heads. They were accused of being superficial, which is in that environment is pretty cutting and quite a low blow. But somehow they eventually said yes. Now, I wouldn't call this a full-blown consent when you're having to be talked into anything by being insulted and shamed along the way. The second event was the Samurai game, which is a game that is used in corporate. It's quite an intense and challenging leadership and team building experience, but this one was taken to a complete other level. I am bypassing the details on how it works, but what it eventually meant for the participants was that some of them were sleep deprived and went without food or water for 36 hours. Right after that samurai game, they're pretty exhausted emotionally and physically. And so after that samurai game and after a very brief break, they went into the infamous sweat lodge. This is not the traditional sweat lodge as part of the Native American tradition, but it was marketed that way. And as you can imagine by then, some participants had actually left that event, but others had stayed. The sweat lodge ceremony included 55 people in a makeshift tent where normally it is less than 10 people. There was barely room for all of them. It was packed. They were lying on the dirt in extreme heat. Imagine a sauna with the stones in the middle, and each time you add water, the steam heats your bone. When we're going to the spa, that's quite an amazing feeling. I quite enjoy that. But after 15 minutes, I need a breather. I need water and a cold shower before going back in, and I may do 3 rounds of this. Now, this isn't how this happened for them. They had to stay in the makeshift lodge for several rounds of topping those stones with water. They did not have the luxury of space between them. It was packed. It was probably way harder than any regular sauna, I can only imagine. It was reported that the steam that came out of those stones felt like it was burning through their lungs. Now, you may think that, oh, hang on a second, why are they still in that lodge while they're not all leaving? I mean, you'd think you would, right? Now, that's the thing. James Ray had apparently described the symptoms of heat exhaustion as being normal and had warned them that the sweat lodge would be intense, that they will feel like they were dying. But he assured his spiritual warriors that they would survive and that the experience will forever change them, that when you face your own death, life is never the same. That is a quote that has been reported that he said. I'm going to bypass the horrors that happened after that in the lodge. But needless to say, as you obviously heard me say already, that 3 individuals lost their lives. Many were traumatized, heavily struck by heat exhaustion, and all the symptoms that comes with it. This is a story of coercion. It sounds unfathomable. I can't pronounce that word, but it's unfathomable, okay? That they stayed in there for such a long time, for as long as they did. So why am I doing this interview? Because when I Google Kirby Brown and James Ray, an endless amount of articles crop up. But what I really want to know is, how can it go so wrong? And more importantly, how do we stop others falling prey to this? Why am I interested in this? Well, you will hear me mention going to those self-development seminars, those quote-unquote free weekends, where you can go and improve your life by learning tools and method. And you know what? Those tools aren't bad. Some of those are actually really, really good. And it's free, right? So I guess that's the hook. And I have gone to numerous other similar events. Some I paid for, some were free. But what they all had in common were some incredible cringing factors. One is how long they were, how very few breaks you got, and not really great food. The oversharing of your life, the constant selling at every corner. But the selling isn't actually what I'm against. I get it. You can't really have a business if you're not selling anything at the back of it. It's a bit like, watching the trailer before you go and see the movie. You understand you watch the trailer for free, then you go and watch the movie, you pay a ticket, right? So, but it is in the way that they did it that kind of makes you feel like if you don't buy that really hefty price tag of an event of 10 grand, 20 grand, makes you feel like you're a bit of a loser, or that your life won't be good unless you sign up. That maybe, perhaps you don't really want to be happy. That maybe you don't feel worthy that your life could be extraordinary. This is a format that seemed to be replicated across the board. Whether they were selling how to become wealthy, how to get more clients, how to get on a property ladder, how to be happier, and so forth, and so on and so forth. It's actually even embarrassing to admit that I've been to a few of those. But what we will find out is that the hefty price tag that they're selling those events isn't just financial. So what stopped me from going down that rabbit hole that Kirby and the others went down? Well, in my mind, it's very simple. It is my unwillingness to gamble that much money, and also having the awareness when something isn't quite right and somehow managing to get out of it just in time. Those brakes in my mind were louder than my accelerator of wanting a better life. May that be good or bad, I cannot tell you. I am not one to be forced into anything. But from those who knew and loved Kirby, neither was she. She was strong. She was her own person, always had been. So what happened? There are too many factors and variables to be able to say, I would never have done that. I would never let that happen to me. It is not that simple. It really is not that simple. I too have been conned. All I lost was money. And I know enough people who, when they want something so bad or believed in something so bad, they too got conned. Unfortunately for Kirby, she was caught in a perfect storm and it ended in tragedy. So when I heard the story of Kirby Brown, 38, Liz Newman, 49, James Shaw, 40, on the Wondery podcast Guru, I was really angered by what had happened to them. And what I sensed was a lack of understanding, not from the podcast itself, from the society, the lack of understanding of what happened to them. But that is my personal opinion. You can listen to the Guru podcast and make your own conclusions. So back to why am I doing this interview? Well, I want to know how it could go so wrong, and more importantly, how do we stop others falling prey to this? And to that, Kirby's mother Ginny and Kirby's sister Jean, who you will hear in this episode, started with others an organization called Seek Safely. Sometimes we will refer to it as Seek. And its purpose is to stop what happened to their daughter to happen to others. And at the same time, to support those who are looking to better their lives through self-help and to guide them in finding people and organizations that do have good intentions and that do have systems in place that avoid that kind of torment and abuse experienced by those in that spiritual warrior weekend. I am not saying that this self-help experience is everyone's experience. I'm not saying that self-help is all bad. I do not believe that at all. I love self-help. But what I want is to empower you in discerning ill intent from the good ones, the risky ones from the safe ones, which is what today's episode will go into, and also to celebrate those who aspire to better their lives and to not become disheartened or cynical or stop what makes them feel good and what gives them meaning in their lives because of a few bad apples or a few bad events. This is an episode on how to not let yourself become a victim when seeking a purpose, support, or any other help you may want to get in order to level up your experience here on Earth. I'm going to finish up with another content note. This is not a journalistic piece. I did not ask James Way to comment on this. You can find tons of articles and videos on what I will call is his comeback tour, which is called Enlightenment. And I believe this is based on what he learned from this whole incident and from being in jail. So, without further ado, please help me give a big warm welcome to Ginny and Jean Brown. Let's begin. Very warm welcome to you, Ginny and Jean Brown. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yes, we appreciate the invitation.
No, Alyssa, I'm really honored that to have you both on the podcast because when I heard Ginny on the podcast Guru, Wondery's podcast called Guru, and Kirby's story and your work at Seek Safely, it really touched me. And the work that both you and Ginny and Jean and everyone else at Seek Safely, all that you do is so important because I myself dabbled into the self-help world, and I always felt like something was off, and because there was a lot of not all, but I find that the majority of things I've been to, I probably want to say all, to be honest, and there was always this coercion into signing up to like extremely high ticket, really out of proportion the way that it was priced, the pressure about it. There's no free weekends, because it really coerced you into wanting to sign up to those things. And there's also this element of oversharing to strangers. Like personally, when I watched they show it really well when I watched the Tony Robbins documentary. Like to me personally, it felt cringy. I know other people would think this like amazing, and that's fine. But to me, something fell off, and I feel like it's really hard to put into words what it's like. And so I'm really glad to have you both on and to come here and to explain what it's really like and what you're both doing at Seek Safely, because being able to navigate the self-help industry, recognizing red flags for what they are, is life-saving on so many levels. So before we dive in, please introduce yourselves, where you live and what you do.
My name is Ginny Brown, Virginia. Everyone calls me Ginny. My husband and I have been married for a really long time. Actually, we've celebrated our 52nd anniversary. And we've raised 4 children in Westtown, New York, which is a kind of, when we moved there, it was sort of a rural area about 75 miles northwest of Manhattan. We're both therapists. My husband's fully retired at this point, but I have a small private practice in our home, so I've continued to see clients. Before that, I was a parent educator. I had worked for the Archdiocese of New York for many years doing parenting education, and then worked for some other agencies in Orange County where I live doing anger management, working with people on probation and parole and I had lots of programs for kids that were on probation. So that was an interesting group.
Yeah, you have a big understanding of the human nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my name is Jean Brown. I live in Hamilton, Ontario, which is about an hour away from Toronto. And I found my way up to Canada after meeting my husband while traveling, and I feel like I was always a little bit Canadian at heart anyway. So we have 2 kids, and I'm home with them, and then I also do work for Seek. I have a background in writing and public policy, so I'm working with Seek and home with my kids, and we just moved into a new house, so we're doing a lot of work in our house, and yep, that's what takes up a lot of my time.
Okay, and also I want to just to iterate for the listeners is that Jean, you are Ginny's daughter.
That's right.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest. I'm the youngest in the family.
You're the youngest. Okay, brilliant.
Yep.
And so now I don't know, who would want to answer this question, like Ginny or Jean, but could you in your own words, tell us, like, how did Seek Safely come about?
Well, immediately after Kirby's death at a self-help event, which was so incredibly shocking to us because she was a very strong, independent person, and we just couldn't understand what had happened. I spent weeks just calling everyone I knew who might have been involved with James Ray to see if I could understand what had happened. How could this have happened? And the more we learned about both that event and the larger self-help industry, the more concerned we became. Initially, we really wanted to create some kind of an organization to help the other participants because we knew that they were traumatized. But very few people would speak to us, which in itself was hard because we were trying to reach out to help them, but they wanted to distance themselves from us. So as a family, we kind of brainstormed what we should do. When something like this, so huge, lands in your life, you're left with the question, what do we do with this? People always say, why? My husband had worked for the FDNY for many years after 9/11, and he would always say to the guy...
FDNY? Sorry, what's the FDNY?
The New York Fire Department. Okay. So he worked with many of the first responders after 9/11 in New York. Mm-hmm. And he would always say to the guys, why is the wrong question? Because you're never going to get an answer to why. The right question is, what do we do now? Yeah. So as a family, that's what we kept saying. What do we do now? Why this happened to us? So what can we do with this horrible thing that happened and this incredible loss that we're experiencing to make something good come out of it, to have something positive emerge from this ridiculous event? And it was that motivation that led us to say, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on in the self-help industry. We would hate anyone else to lose their life. What can we do to help people really seek in a safe way so that they're not hurt?
Mm-hmm. I think also sort of, if you don't mind me saying, please stop me if I'm crossing lines. But I think what I'm hearing as well is there's definitely a lack of accountability. It sounds almost like there was a void after what happened at the event, which I'm going to briefly mention. And that, that's sort of where Seek Safely sort of come in and fill avoid, because it wasn't just that someone passed. This could have definitely been avoided. And I think personally, and I'm not saying this is your opinion, this is mine, and is that when I definitely advise people to go and listen to after you've listened to this, but I went to listen to the podcast Guru, where it really explains the story and how it develops in details. But in brief, this is something that is a very typical almost like unfolding of how self-help development. This is with James Arthur Ray, who was very big, came out from The Secret, the book, the DVD. Oprah launched his career practically. This is not Oprah's fault, but I'm just saying, like, he was on her platform, which you can tell, which, you can almost imagine the influence that gives somebody. It gives a lot of power to go on that kind of platform. So, it's one of those where people join on weekends and they spend a lot of money to be part of different, self-improvement, improving your life and wanting to be, improve something, better something, These are people who are really seeking, something quite deep and meaningful for themselves. And unfortunately, from what, a lot of those people who lead those movements, they have a lot of power on vulnerable, people at a vulnerable time. And I think for me, like, why I think, what your story touched me and what you do with what you do is so important is because I find there was a lack of accountability on what happened. There was a lack of understanding of what happened, how it could go wrong so quickly, because it wasn't just one person who passed at that event, So, I mean, this is something I would rather, maybe it's better for you to send your own words, because I don't want to, say what it is. But it's definitely, there's a reason why that podcast is called Guru, because it really is that position of godlike person. And even people who are extremely intelligent, high flying their careers, strong, resilient, everyone can fall prey to that. And I think people even have seen that in, I've had a therapist come on who is an expert on gaslighting and narcissism, Dr. Shannon Higgins. She, after doing the work and studying it and practicing, she married one. It can happen to all of us, is what I'm saying. So it's like, I think I want to remove that misconception of, it could be, how, not understanding how this could happen. I think it's very important to talk about it. So I don't know, Ginny, if there was anything there, or Ginny, you want to sort of say on that, or?
I can jump in a little bit too. We realized that what happened to Kirby was like a worst case scenario, but that it wasn't necessarily unique for this industry. The tactics that we saw James Ray use in the event are things that people, like you said, that you have experienced at other self-help events. And so first we were struck by that, learning that this is something that could happen again was really horrifying to us. The other thing we realized, I kind of lost my train of thought.
That's okay. That's all right.
I'm trying to think where I was going with that.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of
strong people, Jean.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Kirby was so amazingly independent and strong. People would say to me all the time, "How could she have followed him?" And I said, "It's really an enigma, isn't it? Because she was not suggestible. I'm her mom. I know that. She was not suggestible from the time she was a little kid. She was always very, very much herself." So it was really hard to understand that. So the more we learned about those tactics and the power of those tactics, we learned a lot about understanding our own vulnerabilities and then the kinds of position you put yourself in. And a vulnerability doesn't mean you're a broken person. A vulnerability could just be, I want it that much, or I've spent so much money, I've got to hang in here, I'm not going to walk away now, so understanding some of those internal motivations so that, this was not a cult. He used cult-like tactics to control people, but people didn't go there to join a cult. they went there to improve their lives. Mm-hmm. And that's why Kirby was there. She wanted to expand her business. She wanted to look at some personal issues about relationships. She wasn't there to join him. She was there to better herself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think right after it happened, it was a big media story. So we were kind of following how it was being framed in the media. And we realized that people, were getting the impression that all the participants were these sort of like weak, pathetic people. And we knew that's not who Kirby was. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to kind of come out right away and kind of reframe the conversation and say, this wasn't a question of weak people at an event. The problem was that a lot of the people there were very, very strong, motivated people. And the idea of vulnerability with self-help is that, if you're going to undertake this process of improving yourself or changing something in your life, you have to become vulnerable. You have to open yourself up to this change. And so the vulnerability doesn't equal weakness. It's part of the process. But because of that, people are in a position where they can easily be manipulated or harmed. And that's the thing that we wanted to focus in on, because we knew that, there are other people like Kirby at these types of events, and we wanted to protect them from, having what happened to her happen to them.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so can we talk a little bit about the tool and the methods that you sort of uncovered? Because obviously, you really know this topic. And so, could you tell us a little bit about how, because some people, even at that event that happened, from what I could understand in the story, was that some of the people, even at that event, when that happened, is that some people were even doctors or really high flyers in their careers, I've become myself in a very different situation alongside lawyer and CEO of companies, and I thought I was done, but then I realized, oh my God, no, they also got, and it was different. It was to do with fitness. So the only thing we lost was money, but it's just that it can really, some people are just really good at it. Some people are just they're extremely, they know how to read people. So could you tell us a little bit about the tool and the method, those the tools and the method that are used in the self-help industry, the things that we need to watch out for? Because obviously not everybody is there to harm everybody, but what are the things that they lock people in? What do they do?
Kirby had invited me to go with her to the 2-day Harmonic Wealth Weekend, 2-day seminar. And initially, she had heard James Ray in the Baja, where she lived in Mexico, and
at a free event.
Oh yeah, those free events are not free. Okay, yeah. They are not. They're right. Exhausting.
So she had seen him on Oprah. She was a big Oprah follower. All her friends were really excited about that. He was going to be there. They went to this event, and at that event, she signed up for this introductory 2-day seminar. And if you signed up immediately, you could bring a guest with you for free. All these different kinds of tactics. So she invited me to go because it was going to be in New Jersey. And initially I was really busy with work. And then I thought, that's ridiculous. Here, my daughter is inviting me to do this time with her. Of course I'll go. Yeah. And I'm very, very glad I did, because I got to experience firsthand how he operated. First of all, he's a very good speaker. He's very charismatic. We went in the room. Waivers were shoved in our face immediately. You didn't even have a chance to read it or what it said. And people just said, oh, we're in such a litigious world. You just have to sign this, because you can't go in the event unless you sign the waiver.
Wow.
Well, the waiver gives your life away practically. But no one reads it, because you can't walk through the door unless you sign it. So you walk through the door, and then there's this group of people on either side of you jumping up and down and cheering, and there's loud music playing. And I remember walking in and saying, oh, wow, you girls had your coffee this morning. And one of them said, oh, no, we don't drink coffee.
No, of course we don't.
And I'm like, oh, well, I do. But it was so interesting. And then people got up on the stage, started giving testimonials. They had followed him, and their life was now amazing and wonderful. And in a year, they were making all this money, and they had turned relationships around and all this kind of stuff. Then we sit in this large group, And he's using actually like teaching tactics, which I came to really understand were neuro-linguistic programming, where certain words get repeated over and over again, and then he goes, right, and has the whole audience go, yes, yes, right, and hand gestures and all that kind of stuff. So much of what he did were tactics to create cooperation, suggestibility, to get people on board with him. And then as the crowd, more and more people get on board with him, it pulls in the rest of the group. There were things that happened that I, as a therapist, were really concerned about. What you mentioned, Angie, about bringing someone up on stage and having them reveal really deeply personal experiences. And you don't do that. That's not good. That's not good for the person, because in the moment they may feel okay to reveal that, but afterwards they're upset, they're ashamed, they're embarrassed.
But their container is open, They're not in a therapy session where you can just close it, ready to go out and face traffic, like.
Right.
That's right.
And then they leave and there's nothing for them. There's no follow-up.
I remember at that event, he had brought someone up on stage and she revealed a lot of personal stuff. And after the event, I went up to her and I said, when you get home, you really need to talk to someone about this. It was a brave thing that you did, revealing your story, but it's a really hurtful story and you really need to understand it for yourself and figure out where it fits into your life, etc. He didn't do that. Mm-mm. I did that.
Yeah.
But that was his responsibility. He opened a door, let someone walk through, and then let them jump off the cliff.
But he's not a therapist or any type of. He has no mental health background.
But he's incredibly insightful, because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, "Ooh, I would have asked that question." Wow, that's pretty interesting. And then there's the big hype. We have stuff in the back of the room to sell. We only have 3 spots left. If you really want to go, do it now. We only have so many, so the scarcity tactic was used.
And also then, the prices are, I don't know what it's like the US, but over here, if you had a free weekend and they sell you, they try to upsell you because obviously you're there for free and they keep, hammering that in. But it's like, it's like 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. It's like, whoa, if I'm at a free weekend, I don't think I'm clearly not your audience. Like, I don't have 20 grand in the bank to just throw at you. Otherwise, I wouldn't waste my time at a free weekend. I mean, that's just me. But some people probably had the money, but a lot of people were calling up credit card lines, to up their limits.
Right. So, I found myself seeing things that concerned me and dismissing them. And going, but, he has some interesting things to say. And I'm here with Kirby. And let me just have a good time. We had very little time to eat. Yes. Doors were closed so that you couldn't leave. At one point, I opened the door and someone tried to stop me. And I said, really, unless you want to puddle on the floor, I'm using the restroom. These are huge red flags that I, as a therapist, completely ignored because the energy in the room was such, and my motivation to be there with my daughter, everything felt very positive. People were connecting in amazing connections. And so you're in this atmosphere that just says, yeah, those things are troubling, but, it's not that big of a deal. In the bigger picture, it's really okay. And to experience the power of that was really important for me, because it really helped me to understand. One of the on our advisory board, Dr. Christine Whalen teaches at the University of Madison, Wisconsin, and her doctoral thesis was on self-help. And she would not go to an event because she knew, and writes about this, that she knew the tactics are so powerful that she knew she would have fallen prey to them.
But you almost have to experience, right? I think it's like, I think what you described, it's every single free weekends I've ever been to, even the ones that I've paid, even the ones where after I've been to like, there's also the ones where it's embarrassing, like, because clearly I'm admitting I've been to quite a few. So it's like, I've been to like a 2-hour evening ones, and then you pay like, let's say 900 to go for a weekend to learn about whether it's property or self-help, whatever it is, right? So I've been to those, and it's like you describing every single one, and it's really much like you go in, even your senses are oversaturated, because you go in, there's a lot of light. They may sometimes just dim the lights and do loads of like lighting effect, like you're at a discotheque, and then all of a sudden there's all that music pumping. You have those cheerleaders, like you said, and this would be me every single time I come in and I'm like, it's morning, I'm not in the mood, like I've got my coffee, leave me alone, don't touch me, there's too many people, like I'm that person sitting, like I'm like, this is too much, like get off. And then all of a sudden, this is what is so good, all of a sudden I'm like clapping along, and I'm like, I'm standing on the chairs, and I'm like, they say, do you want to volunteer? I'm raising my hand, I'm like, look at me, yes, please pick me, like, you know, like a crazy person. And it's like, I'm like, I started off being like, everybody back the F off, like, this is not, I'm just here, I may leave in an hour, you know, like that's, and all of a sudden I'm in it, and it's and it's like this, is energy is a real thing. Like I really feel that, because you know, it's contagious. And the thing is, even when sometimes I did not want to or agree to clap, like to go, you know, when, like you said, they use the NLP tactics, and they repeat words, and at the end he'll say, right? Now, I've never been to one of his events, but what he does is exactly what everybody else does, right? So it's like, he's not exactly, innovative, right? But he's freaking good at what he does, right? So the thing is, when you're at those events, if you're the one who stays back on the chair and like moody and, you know, resting bitch face like me, you're the asshole if you're not participating. That's what they're doing, is that you're becoming almost this... what's the word in English? Like this, when there's like a large group of people, like you're one team, and what wins you over all of a sudden, you may have shared with someone, something happens, and all of a sudden it's like they really hammer home this, you feel like you belong. It's like a family feel.
Right.
They do that,
and
also
that's why,
in other
and that's also
industries.
why people continue to go back, because sometimes they've made friends there. The community is interesting. It's positive. It's fun. And, you know,
it's energizing.
It's energizing. And you want more motivation in your life to be more successful. Of course, you're going to go to the place with energy. Yeah. You're not going to go where everyone's crying. You know, you're going to go where everyone's hopped up and having a great time. You know, so it's a created atmosphere so that you will buy into the sale of product. It's a created atmosphere so you'll buy into a particular way of thinking. You know, I do a lot of public speaking, and if I have stuff that I bring with me that I think is going to be helpful, I'm not hawking it from the stage. I'm just saying, you know, there's some resources in the back of the room. If you're interested, you know, you can browse them and take a look. Okay. That's very, very different than going, oh, there's only 5 left, you got to go and get it now.
Look,
so
if you say it once or twice, it's fine, but it's really, and then also there's people at the back really pushing it, and I think they place I don't know how you call them, but, you know, not spies, but they place people that are there to say, yeah, I've just bought it, and they haven't. They just work for them. You know, I think they go, yes,
like
of course.
Pumpers or,
but exactly. No, don't worry about credit card. I'll just put it on my credit card. I'll get the money back. I believe in him. And it's also not just, it's very much a buy-in to the person, because I find that there's always a story, right, of like from tragedy to hero, right? And so they always have to tell it, you know. It feels like they're relatable. So people really go, oh my God, if he could do that, he was living in his car, or whatever story they would be telling. I don't know I can't remember which one he tells, but you're like, oh my God, yeah, he's been there, he gets me.
Right. And in terms of the financial too, you know, the financial piece, like you said, that was a deterrent for you, but they sell it so hard, and often the phrase they use is something like, you can't afford not to.
Right.
And a lot of the people there are, looking to improve their businesses. It's sort of like they see it as professional development. Mm-hmm. And so, when they're thinking, oh, I don't have that much money in my bank account, but then the guy on stage is going, if you're serious and you want to achieve the success that you have in mind, this is what you have to do. This is an investment in yourself. It's all that variation of that kind of language that convinces people that the financial barrier is, it doesn't matter. They can overcome it. And by investing, they're going to make it up later because they're going to become so successful.
Yeah, you have to invest to make money, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. You got to spend money to make money.
Yeah, spend money to make money, but they also say, like, to do it like with your worth. They almost say, oh, you don't think you're worthy, and you go, oh, maybe I don't think I'm worthy, and maybe I have low self-esteem. And yeah, I think like what you said about the deterrence. So that I'm just gonna like bring it up because that's something we spoke about yesterday. Is that I think that what saved me is that there's this concept that people call like accelerator and brakes. So for me, a break is like, I don't like to feel burdened by debt, like I don't like to take financial risks, that kind of stuff. I have done and pay the price. I don't like it. So for me, there's a break. So if I had the money in the bank to go, oh yeah, I'll give them 20,000. That's nothing. That's like small change. It's fine. I would have gone on to these events and then gone down the rabbit hole. And so I think, yeah, like there's also this thing that's a bit deeper and, which actually, Ginny, you'd probably be better at speaking on this, but it's like, yeah, we all have different accelerators and brakes. And if someone's accelerators on self-development outweighs the brake of, wait, let's just maybe save the money first, then that's how they get you, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone has different trigger points.
And I think the other piece to that, which I came to understand with Kirby wanted to invest money in property in Mexico, and she had tried to buy a piece of property, and the sale had fallen through. And that money that she had set aside, she decided, well, maybe that just wasn't meant to be. So I'm going to invest in my future. This whole concept of investment. And then knowing how hard she worked for the money that she earned, she was a decorative painting, she had a decorative painting business with an artist. And they did amazing work, beautiful work. But this was her whole life savings. And having done that, she would not have left.
Right. Yeah.
Even though we have indications that she had some reservations about Ray. In fact, there was someone at the event that, again, had revealed something very, very troubling and upsetting and very personal. And she had actually spoken to her afterwards and said, when this is over, call my mother.
Oh, yeah.
So she knew that what he was doing wasn't appropriate. Mm-hmm. So to me, that says, yeah, she was starting to have doubts, but because she had spent that much money, she would not leave. Yeah. She was going to get the best out of it for herself, even if she thought there was something off about what he was doing, that she would be able to manage herself. Not a problem. And I've often said that to understand what happened, you have a man who had come to a pinnacle point in his life of making incredible amounts of money and having a lot of power and a lot of adulation, and had corrupted himself on that. Maybe he started out with initially good intentions. I don't want to make a judgment about that. I don't know. But the fact is, at that point, he was a corrupted individual, and he meets Kirby Brown, who played on full on, which was his expression. You got to play full on. You got to play full on. He met Kirby Brown, who played full on her whole life from the moment she was born. And to me, it was the perfect storm. He met her. She was going to go the distance no matter what. And part of that was because she had spent that much money, and because that was her nature, that was her personality, to always push and to give it her all.
Yeah. I mean, it is definitely because the event that that we refer to here is called the I think it's called the Spiritual Warrior Weekend, right?
Spiritual warrior, yes.
Yeah, which you know, it to give it context, that was, you know, from what I understand, was like the top event that people would want to go to. Whoever follows James Roy Arthur, I don't even like saying his name because I don't want to give him a platform. But you know, so that was weekend that was very expensive. Like, was it cost like, I don't know, 50,000, or was it 20? It was
No, it was close to 10,000. It was a 5-day event. Now, the thing that's interesting is he was selling he had a whole package of events. I think there were 7 of them altogether, and they were called the Pyramid of Power. And the pinnacle event was Sedona. So
the
Spiritual Warrior was the pinnacle event. It was going to be held in Sedona, Arizona, and people had to go to the other events before they could go to that. Well, Kirby signed up for Sedona, signed up for Spiritual Warrior at the 2-day Harmonic Wealth. And because she did that 2-day event again with my husband in California, in San Diego. And it was at that event that she signed up for that. And we found out later he was allowing people to skip the pyramid because he was in financial trouble.
Right.
He had so overextended himself that with properties and cars and all kinds of stuff, he was so overextended that he was saying to his people, yeah, let anyone sign up for it. They don't have to go through the pyramid. Mm-hmm. And when Kirby was there, actually, people kind of pissed at her because they said, how did you get to be here? Mm-hmm. We've expended $75,000 or $100,000 to get to this event. And she was like, I don't know. They took my money.
Yeah.
You know?
I think there's something like I just want to sort of like just explain a little bit more in terms of like that weekend, that, you know, to understand. Obviously, we all understand that, you know, I think when you listen to this, that obviously that Kobe Bryant passed at the event. But it was a perfect storm, just like Ginny and Gina explaining, is that for that 5 days they were put through, apart from obviously all the techniques they already used prior into all these other weekends, is that, you know, they were emotionally and physically drained. You know, there's a point in the story where they're not eating or drinking for 36 hours because, you know, they have to, there's a quote like, you know, play full on, because, you know, if you don't, then you are, it's to do with like, you know, personal development and reaching enlightenment and whatnot. And he basically puts all of the things that are actually natural instincts of backing away, like, you know, your body telling you signs, your mind telling you need to go. He says that's basically you not growing and actually giving into, you know, your the black bags, like he calls it, like the
right.
You know, your demons, and you should grow, and if you're here to grow. And so anything that anybody felt and experienced there, he'd already said that's what you're supposed to feel. That's how you're supposed to feel.
That's right.
And so people really thought that,
yeah.
you know, because he has such a manipulation on them, I think, because of the brainwashing that occurs over a period of time, and the physical, emotional drainage because you're up for so many hours, you're not eating and drinking, the coercion that happens over and over. It is, to me, you know, it feels very much, when I listen to this story and when I hear about the story, it feels very much like emotional, you know, rape basically. And it's like a soul, you know, attack on the soul on someone. And so you're at this point where it's such an exhaustion. And the end of this event, people go into what he calls a sweat lodge. It is not a sweat lodge. He again butchered the concept as well. There he was not qualified to do this, and that is where it all, you know, ended up tragically.
Well, his role was not to protect his people. His role was to get his people to follow him and to do whatever he was suggesting, and to continue to follow him and buy into him. So before they went in the sweat lodge, he actually described the whole physical process of heat exhaustion, saying when you feel disoriented, when you feel nauseous, you know, if you start to feel like you're going to pass out, this is good. These are signs that you're on the way to rebirth. These are actually monikers of success, not warning signs that you need to get out, which is what happened. She started to get delirious in the tent. People saw her rocking back and forth, repeating the same thing over and over again. They were telling her to shut up. That was a sign of heat delirium. at that point, he should have taken her out of the tent. He heard her. And then when people said she's not breathing or she's breathing funny, he said, we'll deal with that at the end of the event. He said that for 3 rounds. And at the end of 2 hours, she was dead.
Yeah.
And he could have saved her. He could have saved her.
Yeah, this is why it doesn't feel like an accident, because it's like if you've been warned, it's not like all of a sudden after 10 minutes someone's having a heart attack or something. I don't know, even then it's not acceptable. But yeah, it's just that I think it feels like, I think one of the other, not so much method of tool, but I feel like some of the red flags are also how people react when they're not getting their way. So, which is illustrated in that episode in the podcast Guru, when you were interviewed, Ginny, that they were putting out clips and retelling things that, if someone countered him or tried to ask him a question, he was quite aggressive back if he didn't get his way. People he did not like to be contradicted, including people who owned the place he was holding the events. And this was not the first time that things had gone wrong in his events. And this is why it's just, there's a lot of things that are wrong with what happened there and the consequence of it.
And like you mentioned as well, I just want to jump in on, the whole idea of having a sweat lodge. Like you said, it wasn't a real sweat lodge because that's a Native American tradition. So this was a cultural appropriation, which happens a lot in self-help as well. And I want to point out that's a big red flag too, because when you see somebody using a tradition that doesn't belong to them, they shouldn't be doing it, and they might do it wrong. And in the case of a sweat lodge, I spent a lot of time right after Kirby died trying to understand what a sweat lodge is. And I was like, oh my God, this wasn't a sweat lodge at all. The people who run them, they apprentice for many, many years to learn how to do it. They only have about 5 or 6 people in it. James Ray's tent had about 60 people. They never charge money, because if somebody puts money into it, they'll feel compelled to stay longer, which is exactly what happened to all these people at Spiritual Warrior. They had, like we were talking about, they had spent $10,000 on this event. And certainly for Kirby, that was part of it. She was going to get the most out of it possible. So you get to that point where your body's saying something's not great, and you're going, I have to push past it. I'm trying to overcome, and I'm trying to get as much as I can out of this. So it's really dangerous, the way that he used this sacred tradition and really abused it. And so, again, that happens in self-help a lot as well. And it's something that people should also be aware of.
And so, how do we stop this? Because I feel, obviously Kirby made the ultimate sacrifice for personal growth. And others are walking around with, crippling debts, and are harmed, are harmed emotionally, with little to show for than, a learned experience, quote unquote, It's we do learn things when we go to self-help, otherwise we wouldn't keep going to them. So that's the lure, isn't it? That's the hook, because you're like, oh my God, I didn't know, I didn't think about it this way. That's okay. That's a new way of looking at things, and how nice is that? But I think, how do we stop this? Because I feel like I'm very much into self-awareness and accountability of our choices and stuff. So accountability goes both ways. When you put yourself, like he does, as the one answer to everything, like godlike personality, you're accountable for how you are, the container you have for these people, how you treat them, how you speak to them, all of that. And so how can we, if someone's listening and they're feeling vulnerable or they're not sure, how can they make sure that, because I don't want someone else to put themselves into someone else's hands like that. Right. How do we stop this? If we still want to improve ourselves, how do we stop this completely? I mean, this is just not acceptable. This is happening.
Angie, this is why our mission in Seek Safely is to promote ethical and safe standards in the industry, And right now in New York, we're working on that with passing legislation that says you have to be honest about your background, your training, your education. You have to reveal the risk that you're asking people to take. And then you have to show your risk management plan so that you will mitigate that risk. And in mitigating that risk, you are going to have licensed professionals on hand to help with the risk that you're taking, whether they're people who are dealing with mental health or people who are dealing with physical issues. That's the legislation, because so many people in this industry have no professional background. They don't have an ethical board to answer for when they mess up. And therefore, they don't have a license. So they mess up, the license can't be taken away. I have an ethical board that I answer to as a licensed clinical social worker. So part of our mission is the industry, trying to make the industry safer and more ethical, and then saying to the consumer, seek. It's important to seek, but be careful. Pay attention. These are the things you have to pay attention to. We have a lot of education on our website. Jean and I started writing in 2012, Jean? All kinds of information, lots of different research. So
we have a whole list of red flags, like all these things we talked about that you see at the events, because we're saying this is the kind of stuff that puts you off balance and makes you make choices that are not safe. So
I definitely advise people to go and read it, because when I read, I was like, oh yeah, that's like every event I've been to. Like you guys, you get it. Like you definitely know what you do know.
Jean has a piece on there where she describes the red flags are really the torture tactics that are used in interrogation by the U.S. Army.
Can you tell a bit about that, Jean? What would you mean?
Yeah, sure. It's like I had read a book for my policy degree that talked about it was by Naomi Klein, The Shock Doctrine, and it talks about all of these techniques that are part of the manual for how to interrogate prisoners. And they're all about setting people off balance and kind of breaking them down so that then they'll open up. And I read it. I remember thinking, this is exactly what happened at the event. Sleep deprivation, food deprivation, being separated from other people. All of these things really make you suggestible.
And other people didn't want to stand up. They saw something was wrong, but they didn't stand up to the other people who hadn't eaten, or they were really in a bad way.
Exactly.
Because then the worry is going to happen to them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember just thinking, oh my God, this is all these deprivation tactics. And like we said, you see them in all of these events. In the spiritual warrior event, it was like the free 2-day weekend on steroids in terms of using all of those tactics. But we see them in so many other events. And so,
We did that piece called Guru Literacy. Like we talk about media literacy, helping people understand how the media, entices us and gets us to basically do things we don't really need to do, or maybe don't even want to do, and the same kinds of information. So I think for safety for people, part of it is the willingness to educate yourself and the willingness to be honest about your own motivations, your own potential vulnerabilities. I get very, very concerned about very vulnerable populations like people in recovery. Or people who are seeking spiritual growth and have been disappointed by mainstream religions. So they're going to go in a different direction that doesn't have a history, doesn't have a doctrine or a theology, but has a lot of really great ideas that are taken from all over the place, but aren't necessarily coherent, but they sound really good. So pay attention to what you're choosing to believe and who you're choosing to follow and where you're choosing to go, and make sure it fits into your life appropriately. Jean had just put together a beautiful tool that we're going to try to roll out this year. It's based on our logo, which is a compass. for people to use. Pick up your compass and look at that compass before you choose to go to an event, before you decide to spend the money and the time. Because the damage is not just the potential for physical damage, as you pointed out, Angie, and Jean has said, it's emotional and it's financial for people. People waste tremendous amounts of money on this.
Oh, I know. It's insane. It's like, it really, I mean, to me, and it's not to insult anyone who's been, my intention is not to insult anyone who's been spending that money. It's just that I think maybe when the prices are a bit crazy as well, that's also a red flag, I think.
Yeah, for
Yes,
sure.
it is.
And if there's not a good, like a refund policy or, it just things that we would expect from other legitimate, places where we put our money that don't exist in the self-help, that's definitely a red flag. Yeah.
So James Shore had been at an event with his wife in July where a woman at the event had committed suicide at the event. And the people at the event were never told.
That was another James Arteray event,
yes,
correct?
Yeah.
And that was prior the Sweat Lodge.
Right. So they were told it was in July. The Spiritual Warrior was held in October of the year 2009. The very interesting thing is that all his finances went dark after that, because when he was trying to make bail, and we had and a forensic accountant was trying to figure out his assets and his worth, there was a lot of money they couldn't find. So that was kind of interesting. But at that event, the people who were there were told that woman, Colleen Conaway, had gone home. They were told that. They knew that she had committed suicide, and they tried to cover it up, and it was never properly investigated. So would James Shore then have made a different decision and not gone to Spiritual Warrior? At the last minute, he decided he didn't want to go. He realized he had overspent, and he tried to get out of it. And they told him, we'll sue you if you don't, or you might as well come, because if you don't follow through on this commitment, we're going to sue you. He came under duress to that event, and he lost his life, and his 3 children lost their father.
Yeah. And that's the same event as Kirby.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's very, they use very dirty. It's very dirty. It's almost like you said, like what they use on prisoners to crack them open and make them vulnerable. And also a little bit like like the mafia. If you're not, the duress. Help me, help protect you. Give me, all of that kind of like nonsense, right?
One of the things that I'd like to also talk about, Angie, is the fact that what we've experienced. Understanding stuff that goes on in the self-help world is one aspect. Another aspect is just the grief of losing someone so important to you in your life. And how do you cope with that? How do you not just collapse as a result of that loss? And then how to deal and understand the legal system, which so grossly failed in this case. In our book, Gina and I talk a lot about being at the trial and what we experienced, because the prosecutor was not allowed to show that he had prior knowledge of what he was doing was dangerous. A lot of information the jury never heard. Otherwise, he would have been convicted of manslaughter, and he would still be in jail. Yeah. So the whole legal system is so difficult to understand and navigate, and working with people who, are in litigious kinds of situations. It's not about justice. It's about the law. It's the legal system. It's not the justice system. It's not the court of justice. It's the court of law. And the only thing that the lawyers and the judge can do is to use laws to advocate for their client. That's it. And if you have a lot of money in the United States, you can get the very best lawyers who can manipulate every kind of minute law and put it to your advantage.
Yeah, it's not fair.
So we realized during the trial that the legal system, just wasn't equipped to handle the sort of complexity of what had happened. And in a way, it's similar to what happens to victims of abuse in like domestic relationships, right? Victims will get all this kind of pushback of, well, why didn't you just leave if he was, hitting you? And that whole idea of the manipulation that you experience, really keeping the victims in. For a long time, the legal system hasn't been able to capture that, and that is starting to change. But I think, again, like, we wanted to tell Kirby's story because these concepts of how the victims were manipulated are kind of unbelievable. Like, it's unbelievable to think you'd go to a self-help event and, tactics that are also used in torture. Like, it just sounds crazy, but it's what happens. And so we wanted to tell people that this is what happens, and this is why we're all vulnerable, not just, weak people.
And unless you're trained to withstand, torture, just, I imagine Navy SEALs or spies, or I don't know, if you're a civilian, you don't really stand much chance, with those tactics. So that's why it's good, like, early on. And, definitely, like, if anyone, like, go and read the red flag on the Seek Safely website, because those are things that are just really important, even just for everyday life, because sometimes we do come across people, they may not have the intention to harm you, but if the harm is there, you're the one paying the price. And so, it's got to stop. It's and I like the fact that you, like you said, like, it is about empowering people to read the signs, to know what's going on, not to necessarily stop seeking personal development, because I personally, I think it's so important, growth and self-awareness and stuff. But when you are, when we go to those events, I doubt that anyone is there like, oh, I've got all my shit together. Yes, I don't need any advice. Like that, usually you're there because you're at a crossroad. You've got question. You may be a high flyer in your career, but personally, like, like some of the people on that podcast, for the story, talking the story about Kirby, some of them were really high flyers, but the dating life was shit, And so you go there but then all of a sudden you didn't realize it was going to take over your life. And I think the other thing is just why it's so, I really think it's really laudable what you were doing, because, and anyone who spoke up, like Laura Tucker, I think it's very important, because when things like that happen, you either feel like, oh, I'm an idiot. Like, let's say if you don't feel like, you may not be a high flyer, you may not be great in your career, whatever it is, you feel a bit like, oh yeah, maybe I deserved it, whatever your thought process. Shame, exactly.
There's shame involved, and it's very, I was just going to say, it's very similar to the whole Me Too movement. I'm not going to come forward and say how I got harmed because I never should have been in that place. I shouldn't have gone along. I shouldn't have done this. People blame themselves. They feel ashamed. They feel embarrassed. They just want to move on. Let me get over this.
Even this self-help, the whole self-help genre has some sort of shame attached to it. Like you were saying, Angie, you feel embarrassed to admit how much you've spent.
Even though I know how shit they were, like, in some part of it,
But even though, like, the industry is so much money. Everybody is spending tons of money on this stuff. We're buying tons of books. We're listening to podcasts. We're following these people on Instagram. Like, it's huge. And nevertheless, there's still this stigma attached that there's something sort of shameful about it. So then just imagine you get taken in and you waste your money. You get harmed emotionally by someone. You don't want to admit that to anyone. You don't even want to admit that you bought the book in the first place.
Oh, gosh, yeah. So, yeah. I mean,
right? So
we all have books hidden in the back of our drawers.
Exactly. So part of what we want to do is also break down that resistance that people have to even just talk about their experiences. Yeah. And I think that whole attitude is starting to shift a little bit more, between things like the Guru podcast, and then there's been a lot about the NXIVM cult. That was a really wild situation. But the front of the organization was a professional development organization. Yeah. It was self-help. The hook that got people there was very traditional self-help messaging. So all of those stories that are starting to come out now, I think people are getting more willing to talk about these experiences so that there is less stigma and shame attached, which is really good.
And it really is the shame, like such a huge word, right? It really is that, because it's like, because like, because even if you are a high flyer, like let's say you CEO of a company, you're not going to admit publicly that you got conned. You feel a bit, you're embarrassed, right? And the other person is going to be quiet because they think, oh well, I deserve it because I don't know much about those kind of things, however, and there's maybe a spectrum in between, but it really is like you said with the Me Too. That's why people are like, why did she keep quiet? I'm like,
right.
Yeah, you don't realize like the stuff you have to they have to go through to even say it out loud, because there's always going to be a part of you, I think, that's so, did that maybe it is my fault? You know what I mean? Like you just go, is there anything else you want to sort of share anything that I may not have given you the opportunity to say, I may have interrupted you and things like that? So is there anything that you sort of like want to bring up before I go into the insights at the end?
Losing a child is unnatural. It's horrific. It's a death unlike no other death. And I think it's really important to understand that whole process of grieving, our child that we've lost wants us to live. They don't want us to get buried with them. And in writing the book and writing about grief, so much of what I work with my own clients as a therapist, we have this beautiful life, this beautiful world, wonderful people, and we have to learn how to embrace our sadness, but allow ourselves to live with purpose, with passion, with joy, so that our life can be as good as it can be, despite the challenges, despite the things that have happened. What I said to my children on our way to Kirby's funeral was, do not let your sadness or your anger become so overwhelming in your life that you can't live with joy. Don't allow that, because then you will have allowed another victim to be taken in our family. And I'm going to do my best to make sure that doesn't happen. He's already taken one of our family members. He's not going to take anybody else. But it's a process. Grief is a process, and this particular kind of grief is very hard for a parent to recognize it, to figure out where you need to put it in your life so that you can continue to live in a good way, so that your life can be beautiful and wonderful. Is something I feel very strongly about, trying to help people understand.
Mm-hmm. And, part of our motivation when we wrote the book as well was not just telling Kirby's story, but hoping that people will be inspired by her, because she did live with such like an incredible excitement for life. And I think we always balance between saying there are a lot of, red flags in this industry. There's a lot of potential for harm, but we don't want to prevent people from living with that kind of excitement for life. And if that means that you're looking for resources to help you kind of get to another level, or to get over some hangups that you might have personally, that's okay. In fact, that's wonderful. We all should be living, trying to make the most out of our time here. And so we hope that people will also not just be cautioned by Kirby's story, but also be inspired by it.
Yeah. No, I love that you don't go into that extreme of, oh, personal development is awful and that it's very, very big of you. I mean, that it's definitely, I don't know, it's yeah, you've definitely come a long way, and I feel that it is definitely really important, and I think that that's the question I wanted to ask you. Is there, I don't know if you're allowed to say this, but because I know you have the pledge that people can sign, the Seek Safely. There's like a pledge for
Mm-hmm.
organization who do self-help.
Mm-hmm.
Are those the organization that are agreeing and committed to make sure that they do no harm and address all the things that we talked about today, around, transparency, honesty, liability, having professionals there, and so on and so forth? Is there a list on your website, or is it, how do people find out, like, well, I really want to do self-help, and like, where do I go now?
We do have a list on our website of people who have signed the promise. And it's important to understand that the promise is a public declaration of intent. We're not monitoring the organizations. We're not saying these are great people, these people are safe. We're saying these people have promised you to be safe. So now when you go there, this is what you're entitled to. Look at the promise. And if this is not what's happening, then maybe you don't want to stay. But we never wanted to set ourselves up as a place to monitor the industry and say, oh, this is good, this is bad. It's still within the consumer to make those decisions, but we need information to make the decisions. And certainly having people signing the promise and saying, this is my intent, is a great way to start. And then you look at, okay, they're following through on their promise, and maybe you don't see any of those other kind of red flags that we also put up for consumers. So that's our hope, that that's a tool or a way for people to monitor their own experience and make their own decisions about where they want to spend their time and money.
Yeah. No, I think that's brilliant. I want to ask you, has your philosophy or the way you perceive things changed in the last few years, in hindsight of everything? Anything that you'd want to share?
Yeah, I think, I have become more skeptical. So I try to balance, that sense of skepticism with also wanting to be open and kind of give people the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, I sort of think more critically about, information, where information is coming from, who's saying it, what their agenda might be. Yeah.
I would say that that's true for myself as well, although I love being a trusting, hopeful person. And I'm not going to change my core self because of something that happened. But I do pay better attention. And I think also the recognition that there's probably, I hate to say it, but I really think like there's more narcissistic sociopaths running around than we realize. And that's just part of the human condition. Why did that happen? Why have those people developed these tactics? There's a reason for everyone's behavior. And it comes out of what they've experienced and who they basically are. So there's pain, there's hurt, there's all kinds of things that cause people to develop really bad patterns.
Yeah.
And I always want to be careful for myself, but also practice compassion with whomever I meet. Yeah. And one of the things that we often say was one of Kirby's taglines was practice compassion. And on her vehicles, she had that sticker from the Peacemonger. This is a guy in the States who does these bumper stickers. And the practice compassion bumper sticker has like all the main religious symbols spelling out the word compassion. It's really cool. But that's something that to me has been reinforced, that even as you experience pain and you see bad behavior, I want to be more compassionate than judgmental, and try to understand. At the same time, protecting myself. We're all entitled to do the things that we need to do for our self-protection.
Yeah, and I'll add there as well in terms of that compassion. I definitely think my own compassion has grown as well, because I understand now how easily we can be manipulated. So when I see things happening, politically, or over the last few years with COVID and everything, like, I understand now how people can be convinced by something that seems kind of crazy before you get into it.
Yes.
And so I do, along with my own personal skepticism, I definitely do have a little bit more understanding of how that happens. And so even when I'm personally feeling angry or frustrated, I try to approach understanding other people with that knowledge.
Yeah, because everyone feels self-righteous to their opinion, action, and so on, because we all have to justify ourselves, right? Otherwise we don't sleep at night. And I think that's part where the compassion was comes in. It's like, well, everyone feels like this is the right thing, or and so on. And I'm not talking about people who are sociopathic and psychopaths. It's a different ball game. But yeah, like your fellow, assuming people with a heartbeat and warmth. But I think it's I just wanted to sort of say something about what we both said. Is like, I think it's good to have a little bit of a protection, and to protect yourself, and at the same time not letting him or anyone else take away your essence, right? And the beauty and the purity of the joy that you have. And I think this is why I think it's important to. It's good to still have it, but this is why when you have this as a human being, it's important to have a little bit of a barrier to protect you. Like we used to have in the old days, you have to have a village, right? And people were looking after each other. Now we're more in isolation, we're all like living in our own flats and so on. And then, so we need to have that little village around us. And I think there's nothing wrong in putting that protection shield and to let people qualify who you let in, who you let influence you, and so on, and to always look within. That's really important. So question everything. A bit of cynicism, nothing wrong with that, I think, personally. But it's no, I think that's good. Otherwise, I think if you don't have that, that's probably when we can totally tip over to another spectrum and forget who we are and see everything so in total negativity, right? Which is easily done, and I think the world sometimes enables that and enables people with very bad intent, unfortunately. So I'm going to ask you both the finishing thoughts that I ask all of my guests. So the first one is, there's two of them. The first one is, what do you wish you'd realized, but like really understood on the cellular level, not just in your mind, really understood at 18?
I think that life can be great despite the challenges that they bring, and the recognition that life will always bring you challenges, and that you never know what's behind someone else's door. I think I knew that a little bit when I was 17 or 18, but certainly understanding that more as I've gotten older is, it keeps you from making all those decisions about everyone else being an idiot because you're so smart. The fact is, everyone thinks the way they think, and it makes sense to you. Otherwise, you'd think something else.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Jean?
I guess one insight that, probably would have been valuable for me at 18 was coming to understand that everything is a constant process. So I've learned this with grief. I've learned this with forgiveness. We think of these things as like something that you finish, you go through, you finish, and then you're done.
Yeah.
And that's just not real. These are processes, and there are so many things like this in our lives that you're growing, you're changing, but there's not an end point. It's going to keep going, and you're going to change, and you're going to grow, and that's okay. That's all part of it. And that, we need to drop this expectation that there's this place to get to, and then we're done and everything is good. Like it just keeps going. And, with grief and with forgiveness, I've found that you kind of come to realizations and you think, oh, good, it's like a relief to get there. But then you might have to go back a little bit again and kind of work through some of it again. And that's normal. It's all part of it, and that's okay. I think knowing that is helpful, and it's a bit of a comfort.
Yeah, it's almost like it comes in waves, and everyone processes it differently, right?
Yeah.
Everyone processes it differently, and that's why sometimes it's hard to know how to even be there for someone to whom it's just arrived, to whom it's just happened to, right? Because you may deal with it one way, but someone else is different. And so, but yeah, I felt like with time, you learn how to live with it. You're never like completely over it. It's fine. It's just, you are actually learning to live with it, and it has a lesser charge maybe over time. And then all of a sudden it takes you by surprise. It's really a weird thing. Yeah.
So, Jean, I thought when she asked you what you wish you had known when you were 18 was that your mom was right. Your parents were brilliant.
My mom is brilliant. No, I already knew that when I was 18.
No, she knew that when she was 15. That's why she didn't think it was relevant to the question. And so the second question, second and last finishing thoughts that I ask before I ask how people can find you and connect with you and support you, is what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
I can jump in on that one. And like I just said, it's all a process. So the fact that I have come to this realization doesn't mean that I don't struggle with it anymore. But, I don't want to waste my time on things that aren't important or valuable for me. So I try not to waste my time. And I think part of that realization for me is that I have a sister who was living this incredible full life, and it was cut off when she was 38 years old, and I'm 38, So our lives are very, very precious, and I don't want to waste my time, which doesn't mean that I sometimes find myself, scrolling Instagram or Twitter or something, but then I try to remind myself, I don't need to waste my time on this. This is not doing anything for me. So, yeah.
I think the shit I don't want to put up with anymore is my own negative self-evaluation, that I haven't done enough, I haven't worked hard enough, I haven't made a big enough impact. One of the things that's been really hard in doing Seek is that I had expectations about this organization that I didn't even realize until I didn't see them happen. And I think that's true of a lot of things in our life. We say we don't have expectations, but then we feel dissatisfied and upset. And then we roll it back and we go, well, why is that? Oh, well, because I really thought this was going to touch more people. I really thought, there would have been more tangible results as I left paid employment to start this organization. And it's been very hard. It's been hard to connect with people. And it's also, I'm not a business person. It was not my skill set. So I'm no longer willing to put up with the shit of saying to myself, you didn't do this well enough. Because there's stuff I do that's really good. And then there's stuff I don't know how to do. And that's okay.
Look, I can honestly say what you're doing is amazing, because when I read the website, I was like, yes, correct. Yeah, that you get it. And I think those are things that are really important. And the thing is, it's really hard to touch a lot of people when you don't have a platform. So things like the Wandry Podcast Guru, that's how I found out about you. I didn't know, because of course I'm not going, I probably don't Google red flags for self-help. I didn't, I don't. So it's like, that's why it's good that you're out there doing the podcast. You have to getting the word out, because otherwise, no one knows, right? The internet is a vast, vast place, but you are touching people, you're touching people's lives, and you are doing something that's really, really worthy. And this actually brings me to the last thing is where can people find you? How can people, what are the websites? Tell us about your book. Are you taking donations, that kind of stuff? Because I do want to say, it's all very well to do good work and have good intentions and do laudable work that are extremely meaningful. But if there is no money behind, it's very hard to keep going, right? As you've experienced, it's really hard. I mean, I so I get it. We all got bills to pay. government is the taxes paid. Like no one is waiting, so they all want their money, and we got to make money. So like I do, it's really important to make sure that those things are there. And so like, how can we support you? How can we find the website? Give us all the give us all the good stuff.
So our website is seeksafely.org. You can make donations through the website. There's a little donation tab in there. Also, if people aren't able to to give financial support, we understand that. So just sharing our information is so helpful. Interacting with us on all our platforms. So, we're on Twitter and Instagram. It's just at Seek Safely, and on Facebook as well, Facebook/Seek Safely. So yeah, like I said, just sharing, getting the word out. If you read something that resonates with you, if you go through the red flags and say, oh my God, yes, I've seen this a million times, like share that with other people so other people can see it as well. That's so helpful and so important.
I would say too, if you learned something or it has really impacted your decision making, let us know that. Because it's very difficult to prove what you've prevented. And it's very difficult to ask people to support an organization if they don't have clear numbers to show the impact that the organization has had. We were able to show how many people we've reached, but we really want to show not only how many people we've reached, but how many people we've really helped in a substantial way. So giving us that information is really going to be important to help us garner more support, because up to this point, this organization has been supported by our family and friends who love us. And I keep telling them, please don't divorce me. I'll do something to expand our donor base. I promise. I promise. But that's really been the difficulty. As you're saying, we haven't had the platform, and not-for-profits always struggle anyway, because you can't do the work if you don't have a staff of people who are being paid to do the work. But no one wants to donate for salaries. But then the work doesn't get done.
The work doesn't get done, exactly. Yeah. You need good people in place to actually grow the mission, and you're out there. There's many things that you're doing with the legislation and things like that are very important. And so anyway, that I can support, I'm really glad to do so. So
and I'll say as well, in terms of consumers reaching out to us, we dream of creating a Me Too moment for self-help, right? So telling people that, not just with us, but just in general, sharing their stories of abuse from this industry, it's so important. And I want to tell people, if you've had an experience that was bad with this industry, like, we will believe you, and there are a lot of people who have had these experiences, and you're not alone. So I think having people really understand that there is an audience now to hear your story, that's really important.
Yeah. And would really like people to consider purchasing our book. Last year we also created the audio book. So it's on Amazon. What are other places, Jean?
What's the book called?
It's called This Sweet Life, How We Lived After Kirby Died. And Jean and I both wrote it. We thought it would be interesting to write this story from the perspective of the mother and the sibling, because our experiences are different. And yet it gives, I think, a much richer picture of Kirby, but also a richer picture of the grief journey, dealing with the legal system, and also dealing with a public story, because this was international news. So we allowed our lives to be completely invaded, and that has had its own challenges as well. So, to be able to help others who may be having to negotiate similar things was also part of our intent in writing the book. So considering purchasing the book is a wonderful thing. There are other places where people can get the book and audio stuff. Jean is in charge of the tech stuff.
Yes, yeah. So you can get the book, the physical book or the ebook through Amazon, or local booksellers can carry it. So if you prefer to support local booksellers, you can go ask them to get it if they don't have it already. Yeah, and then like Ginny said, we did record the audiobook last year, and we recorded it ourselves. So you'll get to hear us read it as well. So
I want to say thank you so much both for being willing to share this, with us. And yeah, I really appreciate it. And, I'm going to keep an eye out on what you do and how it grows. And yeah, thank you so much to both, Ginny and Jean Brown. Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate talking to somebody who really gets it, as you said, Yeah, it's great.
No, thank you, Angie.
You're welcome. Thank you. Really an honor. Thank you. And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram at Tool for This Shit Podcast. Love you loads, and I'll speak to you soon.
Using health inappropriately.